Nick, great to have you on board.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for inviting me.
Where does this podcast find you?
Where does this podcast find me? This finds me at home today. I live in a place called Saffron Walden, which is just south of Cambridge. I'm from London originally, but with my wife and my two kids, we moved out here about 10 years ago now. And but I still go to London for work. And here I am just trying to figure out whether it's sunny or rainy or something.
Tell me more about your experience. What got you excited about recruitment, especially in product and design?
Okay, so I've been doing product and UX recruitment now for 14 years. So I think I'm one of the veterans out there. Originally, I studied design. I did a degree in transport product design, big petrol head, and used to be able to draw cars and bikes. And that's what I got my degree in. And then afterwards, I got a job in design, but it was using a lot of AutoCAD, which was quite sort of, I was used to doing swoopy lines and colouring in and that kind of thing. And also, it was fine. I was working for an architectural department, but wasn't really my bag. I got itchy feet. And after a year of doing that, I wanted to go abroad, but still earn some cash. That meant an easy job in sales, worked in sales, had some fun, came back and wandered into IT recruitment. Lots of people do. That was your typical sort of mid-20s, wearing cheap suits and pointy shoes, pretending you're the Wolf of Wall Street. And I did that for just over 3 years. There was some success there, but I just couldn't see myself doing that for another 30 odd years. So I thought, well, what am I going to do which can take advantage of my commercial experience, that being sales and recruitment, but my real passion being in design. Sometimes I think I should have probably bit the bullet and gone back into design, but instead I went down the route of being a recruiter within the design industry and found out about this thing called UX at one of the agencies I was interviewing with. Needed someone for that desk. It made sense to me. And I went in and gave it as much as I could. And I feel like some of my experience in design has helped with understanding what makes a good portfolio or what makes a good designer, and then just stuck at it. And I've met lots of you guys over the years, been to many events and been involved. I've tried to be involved with the sector, be part of the sector and not just a profile sender to the sector. So here I am 14 years later, still doing the same thing, and we've had some big old roller coasters along the way, but I'm still here.
We need people like you. I mean, people who come from a design background. I think that is quite rare, to be honest, but it's really important, actually, people who come from the domain to be able to kind of like pass on their experience back, especially the work that you're doing in actually placing young designers into good companies. I think it's a really important role. And I would actually love to deep dive into how the industry has changed. So obviously 14 years is not a long time, but at the same time, given the pace at which technology is moving, it's quite a long time. You might have seen everything. And now obviously you speak about CAD. CAD used to be the industry standard. In the UX design space, when I started, the industry standard was Axure, and there was a clear distinction. So Photoshop is equal to UI, Axure is equal to UX, and the lines were very, very distinct. Either you were a UXer or you're a UI. Lines are blurred.
OmniGraph is another one from the past.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that on a CV in a while.
The lines are either blurred or don't exist anymore. So how do you see the industry changed from what it was maybe, let's take 2019, where Figma was the industry standard, and now there are no industry standard. There is no distinction in terms of tool set and skill set. So what's your take on it?
There's a big question. I'd say there's a lot of changes. Even going past 2019, we went through that phase of, I think, UX. Lots of people beating the drum for UX and proper processes, and we were coming out on top. And you had like UX on was this thing that people could really understand the ROI. It had been proven, and more companies were looking to invest in it. And it had gone from the days of being information architects into UX designers or UX architects, but you also having UI designers, I was finding, who wanted a piece of that pie as well, and they were putting wireframing on their CV or mentioning UX somewhere in the CV. And at the time, UX designers were making more money generally, so why wouldn't they want a piece of that too? So there is this sort of evolution of UI designers becoming UI UX designers, and then going towards being fully fledged UX designers. And sometimes things were moving in the right direction. Obviously, there should have been more filtering going on between some of these blurred lines between hybrids and fully fledged UX designers. But anyway, we got to a point where 2019, obviously COVID happened, and that really squashed things right down for a while. But then things came back with a vengeance, with service design and UX and big things, but a lot more focus, even more focus, should I say, being put on digital interactions with companies with so many people having to be remote and not going to shops, etc. So what we saw is going into 2021 and 2022, their best ever years. Your companies were just hiring like crazy. And that's from a recruitment perspective, it's great. From an industry perspective, it's pretty good, but there's downsides to that as well. So we saw this mass saturation within the market. Even before that point, it was already becoming quite saturated, but then people saw this gravy train for this sort of gold at the end of the tunnel where they could do a course, a bootcamp, or what have you, and within 2-3 years, there's suddenly a lead UX designer, a product designer. Obviously a lot of downfalls from that, and I don't think there's many other industries apart from maybe recruitment where you can actually do that. But nonetheless, times were good. People were getting hired, and the competition was amongst the clients more so than the candidates. So fast forward, by the end of 2022, it really felt like the wheels were starting to fall off. There was a lot of tech debt. The economy was just starting to have a bit of a squeeze on it. And then we're going into 2023, 2024 redundancies. And, it was pretty tough going. And actually going into this year, 2025, it's still been tough. I would say we've started to feel like things are starting to pick up. I think we've hit the bottom, which is a good thing. But we're gradually, I think we're still crawling our way out of the pit. We felt like it was getting a bit more consistently busy in the run up to August. And actually even the first week of August was, dare I say, busy, which is rare because, August is always a quiet month due to summer holidays, let alone given the last couple of years that we had, we thought it was going to be a lot quieter than it was. So that was encouraging. Now that the summer holidays are finished, it feels like it's taking a little bit longer to take off in the same trajectory that was going in pre-summer holidays. So I'm hopeful that by the end of September, it should have picked up a little bit more. I still don't think this year is going to be a good year, but I'm hopeful next year, 2026, could be a good year, but we've still got some way to go. There's a supply versus demand is still very unbalanced, not in favor of candidates or recruiters. So we've got a bit of a way to go still.
Totally agree. I think there is, I call it a lopsided market where there is abundant supply. I would call it overabundance. And partly it's because of a couple of reasons, which you also alluded to. Boot camps churning out more candidates than the market can absorb. But at the same time, it's also reduced the barriers to entry. Design, as you can imagine, I mean, you've done a graduate degree, so you will know it better. It used to be a regimented discipline. You have to go through X number of years of training, and then you have to get on-the-job training before you actually get anywhere becoming a mid-level designer.
Mm-hmm.
The trends have changed slightly. I don't know if I remember, General Assembly used to be a pioneer. I mean, they're quite big with maybe 3-month immersive UX design, UI design course. And by the end of it, you will have a full-fledged designer ready with portfolios.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. First things first, some of these boot camps and some of the courses, I've placed some people from some of these boot camps and courses, and they're great. Sometimes the portfolios have been really, they've actually created a portfolio that is more individual to them and not that cookie cutter style of portfolio. And they've worked out in good ways. They've gone on to become great designers. I think the problem is that there hasn't been enough management of expectations in terms of, yes, you can do this course and you can can spend extra for the intensive course or whatever, but it doesn't guarantee you to be a great designer or have a job by the end of it. And I think when this sort of gold rush was going on within digital design, people were seeing this as a silver bullet and getting into design. Maybe this is a bit of a facetious thing to say, but getting into design because there was fast cash to be made, right? And what I'm finding now that the squeeze has come, I'm looking at a lot of portfolios. I mean, I'm looking at dozens of portfolios every single day. And some of the portfolio quality that I'm seeing at senior, lead, maybe even head of level sometimes, is pretty poor actually. And it's almost like there's a real difference between someone who really gets the craft and really has good taste and has gone through the sort of motions of earning their stripes as a designer to create a portfolio that is unique to them, compared to a portfolio which can be done by someone who is good at software, granted. They know a methodology or know a few methodologies from the courses or reading books or what have you, and have put together this portfolio, but it doesn't really strike me as a true sort of designer's portfolio. It strikes me as someone who, if I did a course on how to learn software and I read a few books, I could probably put a similar portfolio together myself. Some of the advice that I'm going back with, a lot of the times it might be more visually orientated. So I think this portfolio subject will kind of depend on which angle we're looking at, whether we're looking at more the strategic UX end or the more sort of visual UI end. In this case, I'm talking more about the visual UI end. But some of the advice that I'm giving, and whether it be to do a presentation and layout, I don't feel like I should necessarily be having to give this advice. I feel like some of this, the things that I'm saying, is quite basic, and yet there's someone saying to me that they're looking for a salary, and the presentation of their portfolio is quite poor. So I feel like with this mass rush within the design industry, it has led to a lot of dilution. Same could be said about the specialist recruiters. They've also jumped on the bandwagon, and lots of them have gone from zero to hero quite quickly. At least in terms of titles, doesn't mean that they necessarily know what they're truly looking for, or asking the right questions all the time. So I can see how it happens, because if there's cash to be made there, and it seems easy to be made, then lots of people are going to do it. I almost think, and this is quite a privileged thing to say because I'm in a job, but this kind of reset that we've now had in the market, for the industry at least, it could be a good thing, where we're having a bit of reset. We're really seeing who's coming out as the true seniors, the true leads, the designers who really get it, whether that's from a UX perspective or a UI perspective. I think it's all starting to come out in the wash now. And we might find that some of the people who are in it for a quick buck, who are now struggling because their portfolios just aren't up to par, they didn't have enough of the ingredients in the first place, perhaps, and they might get pushed out to another sector. And that could be a good thing for them as well, because it's really hard at the moment. So, you'll see it on LinkedIn, hundreds of people applying per role. And unless you're the real deal, it's going to be a tough one for you to get in there. So, it could be months and months until that person gets a role. But actually, maybe the better thing to do is look at a different career choice. What I mean by that, actually, just to clarify, is, I don't want anyone to, I don't want to give any sort of justice to anyone being out of a job. But what I mean by that is that I think I question some people's reasoning for going into product design or UX design in the first place. I get it for some people who've worked as a graphic designer initially, and they've evolved into a product designer, or they've worked here within research and evolved within UX, something along those lines. But when we've had a complete career switch from, I don't know, a geography teacher or a plumber, and decided to do a course, and now they're a product designer. Again, there's no right or wrong way of doing it, but could that be a bit more telling sometimes? Like, for example, when I've got clients asking me for a product designer, and perhaps someone who's a bit more on the UI side, a bit more on the visual side, and they want that craft, they want that taste, probably say 9 out of 10 times the portfolios that I'm seeing that tick the correct boxes are coming from a graphic design background. It's something that they've wanted to do from day one, rather than see it as a quick sort of way of getting fast cash by switching into a design career, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think you touch upon really good points. Interestingly enough, I think the reverse is also true. I've seen some really, really good designers struggle to actually carve out a good portfolio demonstrating the work. And in a way, it's a lot of disservice, because in a way, the entire industry has kind of converged into a portfolio screening machine,
Mm-hmm.
which, in my opinion, sometimes does not do justice to the real craft. I mean, industry has changed. Obviously, you got to be AI native. That's, I think, a hard job requirement than a degree. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a constant. And many people are actually trying to reset or kind of recalibrate their own portfolios, their entire CV and experience, just to be able to reorient in the new job market. Tell me more about senior people who are struggling to actually find their bearings in the new world. So obviously, it is quite straightforward from a junior role. Yes, you need to actually be able to at least be able to translate and transcribe your process in a decent looking portfolio just to get a foot in the door.
Yeah.
Many people are struggling, seasoned people. So what's your take on it? And second question is, it's a relationship business. So obviously, you work as a conduit between the client and the candidate. In a way, it's a matchmaking service. How do experienced people find their footing in this new world where there's a hard requirement to be able to demonstrate a really good slick portfolio,
Mhm.
which is different, stands them out from the competition. But more importantly, how do people are navigating this new world?
Right, I'll go back to the first question. So, in terms of seniors and leads navigating the job market, it's a tricky one because again, the last 2 years, I feel like lots of the head of level and even some leads have been chopped out of P&Ls to protect the P&Ls with their bigger salaries, and a lot of direction coming from founders or C-suite, and the skeleton crews being left over of doers, essentially ICs, seniors, two leads, and that's left a number of lead level people out of the job. In this market, it's hard because I've had a lot of leads and midweights, people of all levels who have been coming to me saying that they're applying to roles they were doing 5 years ago, and quite frankly, they can do standing on their head. And at the moment, they're not even getting an interview. Why is that? And I feel like in this market, having the right technical skills or the right number of years of experience isn't enough. The clients are spoiled for choice, and I can't help but feel that in some cases the clients are holding out for a 10 out of 10 or 11 out of 10 fit. What I mean by that is, a few years ago, if you were a UX designer, a product designer, and you're applying to a role with a fintech, and you're coming from a predominantly e-commerce background or an agency background or some other background, but you've got a nice portfolio, you come across well, and you've got some years under your belt, you're going to get an interview potentially. But I think now, the clients are like, well, we've got all these applicants. We've got this person from e-commerce background. We've got this person coming from agency backgrounds. We're a fintech, and then we've got three guys over here who are coming from a fintech background. Two of them are our competitors even. So, I think the sector experience is playing a bigger part than it has done. I'm advising a lot of people, whether they're senior or midweight, to play to your strengths. Not to say you don't have a chance with other sectors, but I think you'll see and you'll probably hear about lots of people tailoring their applications. And I just think sometimes these people are getting pipped to the post, they might be getting pipped to the post by other people who have much more similar and familiar sector experience. And for a client where budgets have been tight and you've finally got a chance to spend or invest, shall I say, and build their team, getting someone from the same sector is probably a safer bet, right? And right now, I think lots of people are looking for safe bets rather than taking more risks. So that's something to maybe bear in mind when they're applying, and rather than just doing mass applying, or at least maybe take some comfort when they get rejected. It's not necessarily because of them, or they haven't got the right user experience, not got the right title, any of that stuff. It might just be as simple as the client going for someone who's got more relevant sector experience, because that's a safer bet. So I don't know if that's a useful advice, or maybe just something to keep in mind. But in terms of standing out, I think, again, also from a UX perspective, when I'm looking at UX profiles or portfolios now, that's actually changed compared to how it was 5-10 years ago. So when I'm looking at portfolios, it's almost like everything's taken a slight shift, a few degrees towards visual. So if I'm looking at for a UX portfolio, I've got product design eyes on. So I'm almost looking for a bit of polish there. I'm not necessarily looking for visual design, but I'm looking for that the display, the execution of the layout to be that much more leveled up compared to how it might have been a few years ago. Where as long as you show your process, and sure, it's a bit low fidelity and it's a little bit scrappy, as long as you can show that process and you've got your years under your belt and you've got some well-known names on your CV, cool, that's enough. But now I don't think it's enough. I think there has to be a certain level of engagement there, visual engagement, to keep me involved, because there's so many other applicants to choose from now, especially within UX. So like I said, I'm not expecting UX designers to show visual design, just a case of how they're presenting their portfolio. That needs to be a bit more visually engaging, because there's so many other people to look through. So that's one point. And when I'm looking at product designers, I feel like I'm always looking at a UI. I'm looking with UI. Their portfolios have got to be even more visually engaging. Perhaps there's going to be some motion design in there thrown in. That's another area where I think UX or CX has gone through periods of enhancement through motion. I'm seeing a lot of hybrids between branding and UX UI nowadays as well, but that's just a different subject. And then when I'm looking at a UI portfolio, I'm looking at something, I'm expecting something really creative, really sort of dramatic and colorful. So it does feel like everything's taken a few shifts towards being that sort of visually engaging hook in to stand out amongst others. And you know what? something that reminded me about this, or made me think about portfolios the other week, was we took a family holiday to Dorset during the summer holidays, right? Dorset, I don't know if you've been there, but well
Beautiful.
known for the fossils, right? And we went on this tour, and this guy who's leading the group, he's a real fossil nerd, but he was a great way about him, really knew his stuff. And he was talking about, millions of years ago, how you had all these different animals, things that live in the sea, and they look quite similar. They do different things. Some of them might be mammals now, and some might have been still fish, but they look quite similar. They have flappy tails or certain shells that look similar. He coins the term convergent evolution. And we see it now even with car design, right? Because of safety regulations and modern day requirements from families and things like that, a lot of cars are looking very similar, especially like the SUV ranges. Again, the engine block has got to be a few centimeters below the top of the bonnet. There's got to be enough space for side space for, I think, Tesco shopping in the boot, what have you. So this term convergent evolution made me really think about portfolios, and how, mentioned before about some of those boot camps churning out cookie cutter style portfolios. It has made it therefore that much harder to stand out, because everyone has been listening to people like me talking about, show the process, show the process, show the process. So they're showing the process, they're using the same software, and they are creating portfolios that, they're technically correct, but they're lacking that extra little bit of oomph to really stand out. And, we're not just talking about visual oomph. The other thing that's been the other buzzword that's been bandied about over the last couple of years outside of process has probably been impact. Again, with client budgets being so badly affected over the last few years, clients want to know, right, if I'm bringing this individual person in, what impact, what return on investment am I truly going to get for this salary or rate that I'm going to pay them? And it's not a case of what have they done with a team, what did they do on this course, what did they specifically do? I know that's been said 100 times before, if not more. But again, that's another area where I think it's really important to talk about that impact that they, as an individual, brought to the team with their decision making, with their rationale, but then display it in a way that is engaging, rather than some sort of Times New Roman box or something like that. So yeah, I think there's some things to bear in mind there with portfolios, but there's a whole load of other much smaller things as well that people might not even realize. On their CV, they might not have a portfolio link. And when you're a recruiter or an internal recruiter and you are literally looking through 100 applications, and there's a person who kind of looks like they're good on the CV, but there's no way of getting their portfolio unless you get in contact with them. It sounds lazy, but you've got another 99 CVs to go through and look at their portfolios before you contact that person. And I get it. Sometimes there might be an NDA or something that restricts it, but sometimes I'll get in touch with that person because I think there's enough good experience there to warrant this person's worth investigating. And there's not a whole lot of due diligence from their side before they just send over the portfolio link, say, sure, here you go, or here's the password for the case studies. So if you're not going to do the due diligence, then you might as well just give the portfolio or the password straight off the bat when you do your submittal, in my opinion. Sure. Just anything that's going to cut down any barriers to you getting spoken to, either by a recruiter like me or someone internal. You want to remove as many barriers away from possible. The competition is so fierce. You want to take away as many sort of barriers as possible towards you getting spoken to. It's just as simple as that.
With that said, obviously there is definitely no bandwidth in the world to be able to sift through all the organic applications come your way. It's just how it is. I mean, I get thousands of applications. I can't go through them all individually. So my question is then, who do you gravitate to? People who are in your inner orbit, because obviously UX and design industry is still a very small industry. And there's a lot of social proof with your trust mechanisms where you've worked with a client before or you worked with a candidate before. They are come off a recent contract. They want to get back. So is the industry, and again, you talk about also the expectation from the client being either having a safe pair of hands on their projects or having a 11 on 10 candidate. So how do you manage the two together? So you have rock stars, been there, done that, always employed, going through one project to another. And then you have the rest 99%, kind of like trying to recalibrate, reorient, evolve, and then trying to get the foot in the door. So, what is the right balance, and how should one go about if they are on the latter 99%?
Well, yeah, in terms of how I would personally recruit, if I have a known network, they know me, I know them, there's trust there, I know what they're good at, I know what they're weaker at, and I know their personality, I can make a better judgment as to how well they're going to fit with my client, depending on how well I know my client as well. But yeah, ultimately I'll have my A team of people who are perhaps my go-to people, but it will depend on the role. But otherwise, it'll be a case of having talks or coffees with various different applicants who I think fit the bill to really assess, what they're like. And again, this is more of an assessment. This is past what's just been shown on a piece of paper or a portfolio. This is assessing the cultural fit as well. But I think for right now, I'm basing a lot of my judgment on recent experience. So where I said before about clients sort of being able to hold out for as safe a pair of hands as possible. If again, using that example of a fintech, if I have a fintech client and they've got a contract position for a UX designer, a product designer, and they're a fairly new client for me, but they're a fintech, they're top 50, whatever, and I've got people who are applying and they had done fintech experience. I might put on the LinkedIn advert, have you worked in fintech before? You have to have worked in fintech to be eligible for the role. And then it turns out the person worked in fintech, but it was 5 years ago. Humans haven't changed in the last 5 years. The market might have changed, but humans haven't changed in the last 5 years. In theory, that experience should still be relevant. However, what I'm finding is that I'm still able to get other candidates who've worked in fintech yesterday, last week, for the last 2 years, the last 3 years, whatever. And these are the guys who are more likely in some cases to get a job because it's just that much more recent, it's that much more fresh, and they're available. So I feel like when I'm looking at experience, someone could have 10 years of experience and they could have worked at some really great places. In reality, I'm really paying most attention to your last 2, maybe 3 years of experience. So when people say, yeah, I've got fintech experience, I worked at Barclays or wherever it might be 5 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever, I'm looking at the last 2 to 3 years most of the time, unless I'm told, various different things by the client. And you know what? That sounds probably a bit of a narrow-minded way to look at things. And I have to say, sometimes I would like it if the client was to say, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter what sector they're from. We want creative thinking. We want diversity. So as long as they've got a nice portfolio and they've got, the right skill sets and, they're good to work with, we'll consider them. Music to my ears, great. I'll look for people or I'll know people who fit that bill. However, when it comes to the crunch, the people who gets the job, I still find are the ones who happen to have fintech experience within the last 2 to 3 years, and they still tick some of those other or all those other boxes. So yeah, I think that's something else to really bear in mind. When I've talked before about playing to your strengths, I'm talking in terms of sector experience. I'm talking last 2-3 years, and the same goes for CVs. Actually, when people will put together these 4-page CVs or 5-page CVs, for me, I would say 3-page max, 2-page ideally, 1 page if you're a junior, because lots of people will go into great detail about jobs they were doing 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, and that's just a waste. In my opinion, in this sector, it's a waste of time. I'm not going to read that. It's looking at your last 2-3 years. So if you've got a 2-page CV and you don't want to make it crammed, focus on what you've been doing for the last couple of years, and then for the rest of experience you can bullet point it or make it a lot more concise, because that's where I'm looking at. I guess what I'm saying, and I guess you could say the same for portfolios as well, but over the last 2.5 years, our attention spans have got a lot shorter, or maybe recruitment or practices have got lazier because we're spoiled for choice. So you've got to be obvious from an early point. And sometimes people will get in touch. They might see me advertise a role and they'll get in touch. Perhaps it's another thing you want to discuss, but they'll get in touch and say, hey, look, they get advised to make contacts with a recruiter, form a relationship. I get all that. But if you're getting in touch and your pitch to me is, I'm really passionate about the world of fintech and, I'd love to join this role. I've got 10 years experience, blah, blah. It's not enough of a tangible experience that I need to be able to sell you effectively to the client. Everyone's going to be passionate about UX product design. Everyone's going to be passionate about the sector that they've just applied for. What I want to know is what specific projects have you done recently, and that is the last 2-3 years, What have you done recently that is going to relate to this project at hand? It really and truly, that's all I want to know. Not projects that you did that have a tenuous link to it 5 years ago, not projects that you did 10 years ago that were exactly the same. I want to know projects in the last, if you're going to get in touch with me outside of applying to the job ad, just tell me what you've done recently in terms of projects that relate to the advert that I put out there. And I think that's an effective way to go, probably not just for me, but other recruiters or other internal hiring managers. That's really the meat that they're after, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. Another thing I'd like to add, and obviously you touched upon it, the ROI. So, in my opinion, the implicit expectation for any hiring manager these days is also for the designer to be very, very savvy with business terminology. They have to be able to explain the ROI their work is going to generate to the bottom line of the business. We're living in a post COVID world where budgets are being slashed literally every day, right? There is hue and cry. AI is usurping many, many job functions altogether, even departments. And whether we like it or not, marketing is the biggest department which is ripe for disruption. I mean, I know companies and CIOs who are just literally saying marketing totally gone, it's going to be done by AI. So, what will be your advice to people who have good experience or they are really good and skilled in design? How should they position themselves to be better at being able to justify the ROI and being able to demonstrate the value? And by value, I mean economic value. So let's say if you're working in fintech, what was the bottom line? Let's say how many active users you were able to generate with, let's say, one redesign. I personally do struggle because I get a lot of CVs and portfolios. Developers and designers alike are really good at craft, but being able to demonstrate the value it has to the bottom line, I think that's a missing skill.
Mhm.
So what's your take on it?
I think, yeah, we talked before about impact that individuals have made and being able to describe that within a CV or portfolio. And I mean, if you're looking at it from an AI perspective as well, I think what a lot of clients are interested to know is how they might have perhaps used AI tools within that practice, within that process to help them achieve it. Obviously, there's AI experts being required out there, but I think more often than not, I'm finding clients or briefs which are for product designers, but who have used certain AI tools to get the results, the optimum results that they're after. So I think anyone that can talk about that in terms of their commercial experience, where they've been able to utilize different AI tools and methodologies, will help them stand out that much more. In terms of being able to talk about the bottom line, I guess there's been a lot of chat about, for so long we've been talking about the users, and there's not always hasn't been enough sort of mindfulness towards the business, and ultimately it's the business who are, paying the budgets for the UX teams and product design teams. And if you talk to a financial controller about, lots of sort of fluffy UX stuff that is great for users, they're going to be great. But again, what they want to know is the bottom line. How is that affecting their revenue? And I think what's become more and more apparent over the years are people who can act as bridges, if you like, between the design team and the rest of the company, whether they're design savvy or not. That might be people within finance, that might be people in marketing, that might be people within development, and I think being able to talk to those people in plain English without using, lots of UX jargon or design jargon, and talk about the bottom line from each of their perspectives. So it's not always going to be about money necessarily. It might be from a developer's point of view. They want to know how it's going to make their coding easier or more fluid. From a marketing point of view, they might want to know what's the data saying, how is this going to help the percentages increase? And yeah, obviously from a financial point of view or a founder's point of view, they might want to know, how is this actually going to improve their company or improve their profits? So I think being able to that's a big soft skill that, again, has been overlooked for a long time up until recently, and being able to understand the nuances between the different teams and what's going to be important for those people to hear in order for them to realize, actually, yeah, this person or this team is a good return on investment. And for so long, I think teams have been siloed. In actual fact, 10 years ago, I remember there'd be clients that I'd be selling to candidates and saying they're great client. They've got a UX team of, 10 people, whatever. They're really UX mature. And at the time it sounded great. Why wouldn't it sound great? But that team, in some cases, were probably quite a siloed team. And within their team, yeah, they all thought each other were great and they all realized the return on investment each of them would bring. But because the team was siloed, They might have the head of that team speaking to other departments now and then, but well, definitely, but there wasn't enough of the wider company realizing what this team of UX guys and girls were doing or product designers were doing. And so when budgets were having to be slashed, lots of fingers probably got pointed their way. And I feel like now when you work in squads, pods, or whatever you want to call them, it's a better way of everyone understanding the value of each team member, whether it's a developer, a designer, or product manager, whatever. There's a lot more collaboration going on. There's a lot more mixed collaboration going on. So there's a bit more of a understanding as to what everyone's bringing to the party. And I think that's a better way of working within a company now.
Absolutely. Things are changing. There has never been a better time to be more embedded in the entire business. Again, squads is a really good way to embed a designer into a wider team. I started my career, you are familiar with Aviva Digital Garage. We were a team of 120 people located in the same building. We were responsible for the entire organization. So that team then evolved into smaller squads, which were embedded into smaller projects. There are goods and bads. The good thing is that you have a better perspective of the entire project, the context, the landscape, and the problem you're looking at. And you are more collaborative with the people who are actually building the entire thing together. But at the same time, you also kind of get distance from the team cohesion that you used to have as a user-centric design team, which used to be a beacon or evangelized design across the organization. So in a way, it's good and bad, but obviously, like we started the conversation with, the lines are blurred.
Mm-hmm.
There are tools which are replacing jobs, whether we like it or not. People can wipe code their way into building a prototype, so thereby reducing the need of even having a junior front-end developer and a UX UI designer, which used to be a duo team together. Especially in the early stages of a project where things are not very clear, requirements are not firm. You kind of like brainstorming different ideas to see actually what works, what doesn't work, be able to test. So that actually is changing.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, there are tools, there are vibe coding tools, there are code generators. Now, how does a fresh grad, straight out of a bootcamp or a design degree, compete with the tools? Not just the people. Obviously, there is an oversupply of talent, but how does one compete with tools which are dime a dozen and literally there is a tool for everything?
It's a hard question to answer because I think juniors have got a tough ride as it is, regardless of AI. From a recruitment perspective, I'm interested. I just want to know about commercial experience, anything that's going to differentiate you from other juniors, whether that's an internship or an apprentice position, anything that's just going to give you some commercial experience to separate you from the sea of other grads out there. But I guess that's point number one. From an AI perspective, as I mentioned before, get yourself familiar with the tools. I don't necessarily think AI is going to wipe out all designers, but it's going to wipe out the designers who don't use them, I think. So get yourself familiar with using AI tools within your daily practice, within your processes, and being able to mention them as skills that you're using in your portfolio. FYI, when it comes to mentioning skills, I personally don't like a list of just all the skills mentioned top to bottom.
List.
I much prefer them to be contextualized and be within the descriptions. So you still can mention the tools for the sake of an ATS or sake of buzzword matching, but there's a bit more of a story as to how you're using those tools or have those skills rather than just having a list and then there's no differentiation there as to how good you are with those. Anyway, that's a sidebar. So being able to use those AI tools that you can then mention in your CV and mention in your portfolio. Otherwise, I think just focusing still on the value you can bring as a human being, knowing the right processes and having a good understanding of what's going to make a good difference to this project or what's going to be effective within the portfolio. I feel like obviously AI is here to stay and it's going to continue growing forever. But I do think the way that we see AI is going to change in terms of not necessarily always a competitor, whether it's my job or your job, but I think it's just going to change the way that we use or do everyday things. So, for example, I was having a chat with the head of UX at a large agency a couple of months ago now, and I was talking about how it was ironic how we've had this sort of progression from UI wanting to become, or lots of UI designers wanting to become UX designers, and now it feels like UI is king, and lots of UX is kind of died down. And he thought actually with the route that AI is going, it's going to take a few more years, but the route it's going, it could well flip back around, because you've got AI where you could feed in a design system and that will take care of a lot of the aesthetics. But the way that we use the internet will fundamentally change because of AI's progression. And with that change, it's almost going to be like the internet part two, or the second coming of the internet. And with that, that human interaction with the internet will change. So the way that companies are currently set up with their digital presence will also have to change to adapt to that. So from a UX perspective, that's a great thing, because there's going to be so many new problems to solve and so many new interactions to solve and change and edit. So I think that's probably going to be a few years from now, not too many years, but not tomorrow. And so I think if you're a junior and you can still keep carving out your skill, your craft, position yourself to be ready for that change, so that when the market starts to turn, then you've got a great looking portfolio. You're used to using AI tools. You haven't sort of got too distracted by all the different fads out there, and you've just focused still on being a good, effective designer, whatever type of designer you are. But you know the varieties of methodologies, why different methods should be used for different scenarios, practicing every day to make sure your craft is on point. You're tinkering with your portfolio to make sure that's ready to go at any given moment if you're still job searching, and you're keeping up to date with what's happening, because, again, thanks to AI, things are moving quicker than they ever were. So if you get complacent, you aren't going to get left behind. So I think it's tough. It's tougher, you could say, but I do think there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I don't think everyone's going to be replaced just yet.
Very well put. On that note, I would also want to get your take on just recruitment as a business. Obviously, AI is here to stay, but it's also transforming the matchmaking landscape. I mean, it's basically recruitment. The way I see it is actually a very human-centric discipline, where you're matching the supply with the demand. So what's your view on this industry just changing or recalibrating or converging, diverging? Your views?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I've done UX and design recruitment 14 years, but actually I've been in the recruitment sector for close to 20 years. And there's always a sort of recruitment's going to die, whatever. Every few years there's another thing that comes up that's going to change the recruitment landscape forever. Recruitment remains a multi-billion-pound global industry, and it will change. And there's been talk about recruitment almost being, or recruiters being like the black cabbies, and you've got the Uber coming that's going to take it over, and that's going to be AI. And I don't want to be naive about it and think that's never going to happen, but I think when you're dealing with such a human, when you're placing a human place, well, the job, the fundamental job is placing humans into jobs. I think for now, you still need a human to really identify the best humans for those positions, because especially with design, where you've got portfolios involved and they're very, very subjective. One portfolio for one client could be great, and to another client it could be totally not what they're looking for. So I don't think AI is to the point where they can really sort of get it, make enough of a differentiation between which portfolio is going to match. There's obviously the human element in terms of cultures and how the team fit is going to work. Again, that same human could be great in one team and they could be awful in another team. And again, I don't think AI yet is at that level where they can decipher that. I think AI, for the moment, we're looking at ATS systems where they're picking out buzzwords and making a judgment based on that. But I also think that's flawed, because people are figuring out the buzzwords to put in and putting them into their CV. So I just think that there's a lot more to finding the best candidates than being able to do a buzzword search. And that's something that a lot of recruiters would do in their junior days, where they would do Boolean searches. I mean, we'll still do it now just to identify a rough match. And these are essentially looking for buzzwords. But I think you need to do a lot more than that to really identify the best people for the job. So I'm not saying AI will never be able to do that. I'm sure it probably will, but I'm hoping I'll be long retired. You and I will be long retired by that point. So yeah, it's for sure, it's aiding it, and there'll be lots of other companies selling platforms which will say this is going to change all your recruitment needs. And I think for certain jobs, it will have more of a relevance, more of a dramatic effect. But I think for the more specialist roles, for certain professional roles, especially roles which require decisions on a portfolio, I don't think that's gonna wipe it out just yet. I hope, but we'll
Well,
see.
we are all hopeful.
I don't want to see it as I don't want to be what's belligerent to the possibilities, and I don't want to be arrogant about, we do such a great job, AI is never going to take it over. I think there'll be elements that it will make more efficient, but in terms of, specialist recruiter, from my point of view anyway, a specialist recruiter hiring specialist people, I think AI will aid that in terms of efficiencies perhaps, but I don't think it will replace it just yet.